kind welcome. And first of all, I have to thank the Faculty of Graduate Studies for giving me a chance to come and talk to you and maybe exchange some ideas. What I'm going to talk about today is partly from my own experience as students. I still remember how I felt, even though it was, I wouldn't tell you how many years ago, but years and decades ago. And I also from experience as supervisor or advisor to graduate students, and as well as I have some information from other sources. But first of all, I would like to know my audience first. So could you put up your hands if you are master students? Okay, PhD students. All right, and anybody in your very first year of doing research? Anybody who haven't decided or haven't chosen the lab or the supervisors, anything? Okay, good. So, and of course, anybody in the last year of your research? Yes, okay. Oh, it's good. So we have a very good mixture of audience, which sells well because my talk will cover right from the beginning of your, I would say, your research career, right up to, before you graduate, even after you graduate, even after you become academicians or researchers or work anywhere, the information should be able to help you get along with your future students and give them some idea, right? Okay, so first of all, I'm from science. I'm a physiologist, so some of my examples will be science-oriented. So, but I'll try to kind of think of examples of from other fields as well. And also, I would like to have this meeting to be very informal. So if you have any questions, or if something I said is not so clear, you can just put up your hand and you can interrupt me anytime. Okay. Right. So let me start. Right at the very beginning. Okay. How to select a research topic. So which one would you choose first? Okay, field of research, laboratory group or research group, or your major thesis advisor? I think you all have different ideas and different reasons. First of all, the field of research, I think that comes first, right? Because you know which faculty you are interested in or you were interested in. And then when you, for example, like me, it's science. But actually, for me, my own experience, when I did my science, I did human physiology, and it happened to be my very favorite subject. So, that kind of stuck to me. And when I came back to Thailand, and then, I did quite the opposite of what other people normally do. I went to school in England, and then I did my bachelor degree there, and then I got married. So instead of doing my graduate studies in England, I came back with my husband. So there you are. I don't know whether I made a mistake or not, but at that time, I think romance kind of won over academic ambition. But anyway, I didn't think I did anything wrong because, to study graduates or to do research in Thailand, especially in science, I would say has a yes and no in itself. But I find that it is to my advantage, actually. You know why? Because when you study here, nothing was perfect. Equipment, even to order chemicals, takes a very long time. And so nothing was easy. And I think that helped me to get along and to be patient and to learn how to think of, when I make plan, I definitely had to make plan. So instead of having just one plan, I always had plan A, plan B, and plan C in case things did not work out, or not everything was perfect here. So you had to help yourself a lot. So I think at least to do a graduate studies here in Thailand, maybe we're not the best in the world for your field of research, but I think that you can change it into advantage to yourself. Okay. Anyway, so we chose the field of research. I did, and then of course sometimes you heard about a research group, and so you went straight to that group, talked to them, asked them for the details, or you already know which major advisor or which ajahn you would like to do your research with. Okay. But what are the where are the sources of information if you want to know which ajahn or which research group will suit you? So the best thing is that nowadays, especially in Mahidol University, I would say every department or faculty has very good website. So you can always get information from the website. And in the website, you will get information about research groups. So, go in, search, or even when you already in a lab or with a research group, you might want to find out about equipment that you might be able to use or borrow. Just go into the website. I think you will get a lot of information there. Okay, another thing that you should consider is the number of graduate students in that particular group, or how many students your potential advisor has. That is, again, is a yes and no, or it's a positive or negative. Because, for example, if you go to an ajahn advisor who has only one student, you think this is great because he or she will have a lot of time for you. But at the same time, it might be a bit lonely, right? Because sometimes you want to work with a group of people. Like in our lab, we have lots of people in our lab, so that people can share experience, can exchange information. So it depends very much on yourself as well as the environment around you. But think of that, or make it a point to be aware of. Staff member curriculum vitae, I think that's important too. Okay, at least you have to know what your advisor or potential advisor is doing, and what kind of work you can learn from the publication list there. And of course, sometimes people go for advisors who have, lots of publications, patents, awards, grants, and all that. To me, that's not the most important thing. Okay. And also talk to former students of that lab or of that advisor, because students who spend years there might be able to tell you a lot about how the advisor conduct research, or whether, how can you handle yourself in that particular group, okay? Anyway, for those who haven't decided, which lab or which group of research you would like to join, then find out a lot, from the website and talk to people, okay? I've had students ask me quite often how to choose a major advisor. And I always use the, these kind of very much contrast, very different choices. Older, experienced, award-winning advisor, famous for in that particular field, or younger with less experience and more time. Okay, I'm going to let you choose which one. Okay, I want to know. Okay, this is number one, right? Older. Plus means experience, so lots and lots of experience, okay? Older, not so much experience, maybe, just a few publications. Younger, and very enthusiastic, fast-moving, but still young and not very much experience. And younger with more experience. Okay, this is number 1, 2, 3, 4. Could you put up your hand? Which one of you would like to choose number 1? Older. Well, I would say old. Okay, put up your hand again, please. Oh, that's a bit disappointing because I'm in that category. Okay, number 2, young, full of enthusiasm, lots of time, not so much experience, lots of time. That's interesting. Old, not much experience. Okay, I'm not surprised. And younger, some experience, not as much as the older one. Okay, be brave, put up your hands. Right, actually, for your group, the young with experience and the old with experience, more or less, equal. But last week I talked to a Thai group, like students like this, all Thai. In fact, they chose young, most of them would choose young advisors with experience. So I see that you think experience is more important, which I agree actually, and that's why I suggest that you look at the curriculum vitae or publication list, or experience, or not publications, maybe some of your field of work. You don't need publications, but experience, yes. But the thing is that between old and young, again, it depends on how much time they have for you. Okay, in my lab, my colleague and I, because we have so many projects going on, that we have very little time for the students, and that is really, we feel sorry for students sometimes. Like my young colleague, actually, he's young with awards and all that, and his students will have to email results of the experiment every evening, every night, and he will look, and then he will make comments, and then he will send email back. But they have to catch him between kind of meetings and things. So sometimes people with experience happen to have very little time because they have other commitment as well. Okay, so one thing that I would like to suggest you is that you have to go to your supervisor or advisor. Don't wait for her or him to call on you, right? Make appointment, leave notes, call or whatever, okay? But you just really have to go after them, just to be sure that your work can go smoothly. Okay, so these are just kind of background information. But the last one, that one happens quite often. No choice. You don't have any choice, because when you join the department or the faculty, you are asked, or you are assigned to, let's say, Dr. X. And Dr. X or Dr. X is the only available advisor. Now, some of you, I know that it happens in my department as well. Students felt very disappointed because they thought that they didn't have a choice. But that happens quite often now, because graduate study is quite popular at certain faculty or department. So, advisor may not be able to cope with more than 5 or 6 students. Okay. Therefore, don't worry, because after an hour talk, you will see that it doesn't matter whom you get for your advisor. It's very much up to you. Okay, if you're lucky, Dr. X is very good, full of experience, can help you a lot. Or you might choose an advisor yourself, and he or she is pretty hopeless in terms of mentoring. So it depends on you as well. I tell my students quite often that you can't change the world, not that fast anyway, and you can't change people, but you can change yourself. So sometimes you have to adapt, change some of your routine, or be more patient, or change yourself, so that you can get along with Dr. X. And after a while, you'll find that you can work with him or with her. So it's I would say, between advisor or supervisor and student, 80% is up to student actually. Not because I'm an Ajahn, okay? But because I was student before, and I remember, I still recalled, the experience. So change yourself, adapt yourself to your advisor and supervisor. That's very important. But if you have problem with your advisor and supervisor, if you really think that problems cannot be solved, even though you've been to head of department or the one who is responsible for the curriculum, and you just can't get along or can't work with the advisor, change the advisor, okay? But do that earlier on. Don't wait until, the last year. But anyway, try to get on first. But if you really have problem, get somebody like co-advisors to help you, okay? You can't go on doing research without the help of your major advisor. Let's put it that way, okay? Anyway, I hope that from the look of your faces, I think you're quite happy with your advisors. Give me a smile if you're happy with your advisors. There you are. Okay. Okay. First of all, why is dissertation or thesis a part of the graduate program? So this is just I know you have to do it, but just to point out to you how important the thesis or dissertation is, okay? Whether you're doing a master or PhD, why it's important. First of all, research is a training process, okay? And you search for information, you learn or you train to search for information, especially to select relevant information. Now that, I think that most of you are in this particular stage. It's very important because nowadays, compared to my time, nowadays you have a lot of information available in front of you in all kinds of media, not just textbooks, okay? So it's very, very important that you learn how to search the information from various media. And more important, to choose the selective or the relevant information that will be useful. Otherwise, you'll be spending time reading things which may not help you with your thesis, okay? And then doing research helps you to learn how to think. Everybody can think, but you think systematically, right? And reason, and you learn to plan, to organize. And of course, you have to learn to solve problem, and I put systematically. Okay, for my students, I said, look, you are a scientist, okay? So you deal with research problem scientifically, which means systematically. I think it's the same in any field. You have reason, you have cause, you have reason, you have whatever happened, a consequence. And I think just these abilities, very important to you, and these are what stay with you. Okay, and I told my student that to solve problems systematically, not to deal with your thesis or dissertation, but even your personal life. Sometimes I see my students, looking gloomy and a bit sad, and so I always have talk with them. Okay, and sometimes they have personal problems, maybe financial problems, family problems, boyfriend, girlfriend problem. So I said, look, stop working. If you have problem, you can't concentrate. And if you can't concentrate, you can't do any work. Okay, so just go out and think about it. But first of all, make a list of problems. Okay, make a list of any problem. Don't worry about which one is more important. Just what you can think of as your problem, just write them down. And then try to categorize them or put them in order. Which one is the most serious or the worst problem? Put it in order. Because sometimes when you do that and you stop yourself, you stop being feeling panic or sad, and think systematically. Sometimes to solve one problem, one problem solved, it kind of make the others easier to solve. Okay, so again, when you have any problems, don't panic. Okay, just sit quietly, go for a walk, meditate if you do, and think of each problem. There are always ways to solve problems, okay? But you just have to be able to concentrate. Now, after you start your research, research will teach you how to analyze, interpret the data. Analyze means that you have the results, maybe numbers, figures, or information, put them in order, and then you look at the meaning. What do the data tell you? That's the interpretation. And of course, you learn how to make decisions, and very importantly, to drive forward. Because when you do research, you will know, I think those who do, have PhD right near the end of your PhD training, or maybe into your second or third year, you find that originally your research problem is just one, okay? But when you start to deal with it and get more information or do more experiments and so on, you find that there will be other problems. I mean research problems, okay? Research problems coming up, or research topics coming up. And so I always say that the more I know that I don't know, if you know what I mean, okay? Because now, in the beginning, I remember that it was so difficult to think up a topic of research. I had to read a lot, and then I don't know what to do and so on. But now, there's so many questions that I want to deal with, I want to solve. But I just don't have enough students, I don't have enough people to do the work. So you will find that there's no ending to research. Even after you graduate with a master's or a PhD degree, you will find that the training that you get from doing research these few years hopefully will stay with you, and you can use this ability to deal with your work, your future, your life, everything, okay? Because once you learn to do things systematically, and you plan, and you analyze, everything has reasons and so on, okay? Very important, you learn how to communicate. So while you are in your research time or your research phase, you will have a chance or many opportunities to learn to communicate. It's no use if we find out something, we have new knowledge, but then we can't tell other people what the knowledge is. And there are many ways of communicating with friends, with peers, with the public, or with the academic societies. So you learn, first of all, you learn how to communicate by maybe in a meeting, you present your work. Some people who have already presented a poster, or especially oral presentation. Can you imagine you spend 4 or 5 years doing PhD project, and then you have 12 minutes to present what you found. Those who have that experience will know that it's very difficult. You can spend 2 or 3 hours talk about what you did, but to spend 12 minutes, okay, because most of the meeting, the oral presentation is about 12 minutes, 15 minutes, but 12 minutes presentation, 3 minutes questions and answer. It's very, very difficult. And so you have to train yourself, okay? And even in your department, you have to give seminar. That's a very good practice. So don't feel that seminar is a burden, you want to get on with your research. Or the other activities, even to talk to your friends and your peer. Try that, okay? When you meet your friends or when you have some gathering, try to exchange the idea and maybe take turn to tell other people what your thesis is about. Now, sometimes you will find it's very difficult actually to explain, because sometimes you think your work is really high power, or like maybe biochemistry, and people who do humanities or other unrelated or not science subject would not understand. It's not true. If you can explain what you do to people who are not in your field and make them understand what you do, now that I call excellence, okay? Because that means that you really understand what you do. So try, maybe practice, write a small paragraph explaining what your thesis is about in simple terms, okay? Because if you, in my lab, sometimes in our department we have visitors from all over the place, overseas visitors or Thai ajahns come and visit. I always tell my student that, look, you have to prepare, okay? Prepare 3 minutes of talk or explanation, describe what you do. And you have to make sure that you make them understand, okay? So when we have visitors come into the lab, I wouldn't tell them what I do, but I would say, okay, introduce my student, and okay, you tell them what you do, and they have to be able to do that in about 3 minutes, okay? And of course, if the visitors are in the same field, he or she will ask, and then of course you can go deeper and more technical. But try that, because if you can do that, you really understand your work, okay? But if you find that, oh dear, I don't know my rationale or what I'm doing and all that, then go back to your advisor, or go back and read again, or go back to whatever that you wrote down in your proposal, okay, and look at it again. You'll be surprised, actually, that you will forget the rationale or the reasons why you are doing that research, okay? So you can practice. And the last one, research teaches you how to continue lifelong learning, because after having all these abilities, then you know that you don't want to stop once you graduate. You want to know more. It may not be in the same field, but we would like to teach you or change you so that you would hunger for knowledge, and that you would go on more knowledge from the world, from all the media, okay? Because all the knowledge will help to enrich you. So research is a training process, something that will stay with you. I told my student as well that your thesis, these results, okay, you should be proud of your work, but by tomorrow, it's nothing new. And maybe in a couple of years' time, or even months' time, somebody will come up with a new theory, or maybe prove you wrong. So don't worry about that, because what stays with you is the abilities, and all the abilities how to think, how to plan, how to organize, how to communicate, and the lifelong learning stays with you. But the results, your thesis, it's there, and then it's already kind of maybe out of date already, okay? Okay, so what is a good research question? So research question should be clear, specific, challenging, exciting. Well, I add this one, because I find that if you find your research topic or research question exciting, then it will help you to get on with your work. But if you find that, okay, my research question is clear, specific, challenging, not so exciting, then can you imagine, in the morning, Monday morning, oh dear, I have to go into the lab, do this and that again. No, you want it to be exciting. And so when you talk to your friends, and if your friends are telling you about their topic, look at their eyes. If their eyes kind of sparkle and, the feel of passion, then it means that it's a good topic, research. They have good research topic, okay? But if they say, well, my topic is, well, it's my senior student did it, so I just continue, and, then I feel sorry for that person, okay? So even though now you find that your topic is not so exciting, but you can make it exciting by reading more, getting to know it in more detail. Because everything, once you read and get the detail, everything is exciting. I used the same example that I used when I talked to Thai students last week. When I was doing my first degree, my bachelor degree in England, we were assigned to a PhD student. So one PhD student had about 5 of us as kind of, she was like my tutor. So we would have little meeting every now and then. And I remember that she invited us to have tea in her place, and she told us what she was doing for her thesis. We were biology students then. And she said, it was kind of very exciting. I worked on excretory system of a millipede. The millipede, that little, like a train, little train, insect, not insect, sorry. Yeah, it is insects. That, that you find walking on the ground in your garden. Okay, just a little insect. And, to spend 4 or 5 years studying excretory system of that insect. And she was so excited about it. And she pointed onto her wall. There was a very nice abstract painting, because she, in her, her hobby was to do oil painting. And she said, you see, that was what I saw under the microscope. It was beautiful, the excretory system of that insect. And so I painted it into an abstract painting. I mean, we just look at each other, but we didn't understand then, but now I understand. Because every piece of work, every thesis is very important, very significant. And, in your finding, even, let's say, my publications are just small bricks, pieces of bricks, which may be part of the house. So, science is like a big building, and your work, or even, in your field of work, the knowledge is just a big building, and your part may be just a small brick here and there, or maybe a window. If it's a big piece of work, very significant, it could be a door of one room. And so every piece of knowledge, I would say, is very significant. Who would have thought that, people who work on C. elegans, that little cylindroid, and that would be very, very important now for human genome project. So nothing is insignificant, okay? It all depends on your understanding, because you can learn the concept of, or not, you get knowledge. I always say concept of science, but I know that not all of you are doing science, but the knowledge, the principle, the concept, you can get it from anything, really. Small things, big things, it doesn't matter, it's up to you, okay? So be proud of your work. But if you're lucky and you start with good research question, then it will lead you to good experimental plan. I suggest that you think of your project as something that can be more or less short-term and can give you output in 2 or 3 years, because you have to publish before you graduate, okay? So don't be too ambitious with your project. If it's a big project, divide the project into subtopics, okay? Make sure that you can finish something and get an output out in a year or 2, okay? And of course, you can go on doing more if you like. And make sure that it's a good balance between difficulty and outcome. Now, what do we mean by that? Some people are very enthusiastic and very ambitious as well. So they would like to solve a really very difficult problem. But sometimes you have to be realistic. Difficult problems may not be easy to solve. So you may not graduate, you may not get any results because the topic was just too difficult. If I use science as example, I would say that I might think of a project, but I don't have equipment, not in Thailand, for example. So I wouldn't be able to use the equipment to solve that problem, and I can't use any other choices of equipment. But if you go for very easy topic, That's good. It looks like I can finish in, I can get the paper out in 6 months. But think of other people. If it's that easy, somebody might have done it already, or somebody might be thinking of it and might produce paper before you. And if the work is too easy, problem too easy to solve, it's just not fulfilling, I think. So, it's not challenging. So you have to balance the two, and so that to satisfy yourself, really. But don't forget that you have to be realistic as well and get work out. I told my young staff in the faculty that, when you start your career after you graduate and you join us as staff at the Faculty of Science, you have to produce papers, right? So to get the academic position like assistant professor. So don't be too ambitious at first, because if you try to do something which is too difficult, it takes too much time, you might feel discouraged. I would like you to get assistant professor in 2 years' time, so go for something easy first, okay, but publishable. And then once you get assistant professorship, then okay, you feel good, you feel a bit confident and a little secure, then you can move on and do more difficult things, okay? So I think it's the same for choosing research question. And of course, a good research question has a prospect of more in-depth research. I'm not worried about that, actually, because I think any good research problem, once you get into it, it will branch out, and you will find that there are so many things that you want to do. Okay. I find that research questions often reading, okay? With the exception that you go into the lab of Dr. X, and Dr. X said, this is your thesis, okay, this is your project, which happens a lot, and I'll talk about that later, okay? But you find that when you read papers, or text, especially reading papers, you find that positive idea can come from negative feeling. See your response to papers when you read. If you find a paper and you feel that, oh, I don't believe their finding, it's not possible, using that technique or methodology, or you think that, don't like your explanation, interpretation at all, looking at the data in the table, I could have better interpretation. Or you feel that they should have used another technique, which is more accurate. Or you feel, after reading the paper, you find that that topic or that study is very inconclusive and controversial. And so many arguments in the discussion, and there's no agreement, no conclusion, no clear conclusion at all. So you see that by having these feelings, it means that first of all, you understand the paper, you understand that work, and you can see loopholes, you can see weak points, you can see unexplored questions or unanswered questions. Those could be your potential research questions. Okay, so when you read any paper, look at it in detail and see what else can you do, or what else can you do to improve that paper. Okay, these will come up as research questions. Okay, let's say you now have a research topic. Okay, so you get briefing from your thesis advisor. Okay, don't forget that you have to let him or her know how much you know. And discuss with your senior students or your peers or the postdoc in your group or other researchers in the same group, okay? So discuss the topic first. And then read more. For those who continue the lab project, or it's the work, it's a big project in your group, and you continue from your senior students. So you read earlier thesis, okay? This is a shortcut. It's not, well, it's better, but don't forget that I put it down here, that familiarize yourself with the research topic, which means that you have to read more. You have to read, make you understand that topic first. But a shortcut is to read the earlier thesis from your group. Helps a lot, because if you remember, some of you know that chapter 1 gives the reason, the rationale behind the study, and also the objective. But the chapter 2 is very useful because that is the literature review. So it means that the former students have already selected relevant information for you. So if you read the chapter 2 to get the background knowledge, it will save time, okay? But don't read just the chapter 2 of your senior students, okay? Read on your own as well. And don't forget that that was written at least a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. So nowadays, you have current information, so you have to search, okay? And read more. And for those who go into a group and you get completely new research topic, first of all, you have to identify keywords and read. Now, keywords are very, very important for your career, starting from now until forever, I would say. Okay? Keywords means that they are the words or the terms that kind of cover the area of your research. Now, I suggest that if you're very new in this field, you think of the keywords and then show them to your advisor or seniors or somebody who can help you first and say that, do you think that these keywords are good? Do they cover my field of research? If you use, for example, the keywords are very important. I'll give you an example. I'm a physiologist. I work on calcium and bone metabolism and the hormones which control calcium and calcium absorption, for example. So I study, let's say I study hormone prolactin on mechanism of calcium absorption. But if I use calcium absorption as my keyword, I put it in, enter, and there will be thousands and thousands of papers, or the titles of papers coming up. It's impossible. So it means that my keyword is too general. So I have to go deeper into what is closer to my work. Okay, so you have to select the keyword very carefully. But if you use the keyword which is too focused, too specific, again, you might come up with a few papers, but after reading those papers, you miss so many other papers which are related to your field, but not covered by that particular keyword. So you can think of keyword as a circle, okay? So you don't want the circle to be too big and your work is there. And what you need to know is around there, but there's so much more over there and you waste time, okay? At the same time, this is your work and you don't want your keyword to be too small because it will miss the point, okay, of other relevant information. So select keywords very, very carefully. Ask your supervisor or advisors. And don't forget to use combination of keywords. So because that will, the combination will help to focus more on a particular point, okay? So very important keywords. And that applies to this side as well, okay? So whenever you read, and always have important keywords in front of you, and I don't know how often you search literature, but I told my student to try to check it, if possible, every week, because of that, new papers come up, the journal come up all the time. Don't skip too long, okay? Otherwise, you can't catch up with reading. So it's better to read continuously all the time, a few papers every day, if possible. And of course, when you read, sometimes you don't have to read the whole paper. You just skim through and see what you look for. Okay, but first look at the topic, read the abstract. And if it's nothing to do with you, okay, skip. Right, so check the abstract first. Okay, and after kind of reading, have the project, then you would have broad knowledge and in-depth knowledge in your field. And then you read the papers related to your topic, so you have more in-depth, okay? So always read. I tell my student, but I'm never successful with that, I don't know why. But they said, oh, they're busy, or... So I told them that each one of you, okay, you're working on different projects. I can't follow. I don't check your keywords all the time. So if you find something good, something which is important for your project, let me know. Give me the reference, okay, so that I can read as well. You do that to your advisor, because sometimes your advisor doesn't have time, or he or she may have her own project. So when you find something good, very good paper, print out for them or give them the reference and say that this is very important and this is really good. Because your advisors need to know as much as you do to be able to help you, okay? And of course, after reading, then you may not do preliminary work, and then you will prepare your thesis proposal. Now, do we need to do preliminary work? I don't know about your field of work, but in science, okay, when you plan something, okay, you plan and you, after reading, you have your hypothesis. And your hypothesis is that A will stimulate or will go to D. And you propose, okay, that in your study you will show, you will prove that A goes to B first, B to C, and C to D. Okay, so that's your hypothesis, and you write your proposal. What happens if you do your research and you find that, even though you know that A would lead to D, but you find that A doesn't go to B? Would that mean that you fail and you can't go on? Okay, even though you haven't started doing the experiment yet, but in the proposal examination, you might be asked, if you propose something like that, A to D through B and C, and one of the examiners might ask you, what about if you found that A doesn't go to B? And you might be standing there, oh dear, okay, because you... So it's better to think of possibilities. So even though you don't do preliminary study, when you propose, even though you propose A to D, but plan B, okay? Read and think about it, that is there an alternative mechanism or alternative route? Maybe A can go to X, Y, and to D, so that it proves that A goes to D, but via X and Y, okay? So even though you don't put that into your proposal, but prepare that in case you get the question. Or in the real thing, when you start to do your project, you might find that A doesn't go to B, okay? So nowadays, in the old time, I don't know why, but we didn't, in my time, we didn't do preliminary work so much, okay? We just kind of went on, but we always had plan A, B, C. If plan A didn't work, we go to plan B and plan C. But nowadays, we find that it's better for us anyway to do preliminary work, so that just to make sure that A does go to B, okay? Even though it's not complete, the work's not complete, but it shows sign so that we can continue, okay? I think maybe nowadays everything is so expensive and time is limited, so we don't want to waste time or, waste money, chemicals, and so on. So we prefer to do preliminary study, okay? But it's not necessary for everybody. Okay, let's say you've already have your project, okay, your advisor, your project. Now let's think about the thesis proposal. Now, I find that the title of your proposal is very different. I put it the other way around. I find that the title of the published paper afterwards is very often different from the title of the thesis proposal. Now, Why is that? One reason is that when you write your thesis proposal, you don't know the results, even though you did the preliminary study, but you don't know the results, right? So logically, the title of your proposal should be quite general. Okay, but for the paper, for the publication, you find that the title is informative, concise, and specific, because the results were known already, right? Interpretation was known. Give you an example. The effect of exercise on bone in stressed rats. If if the paper has a title like this, you don't know whether you want to read it or not, because you don't know anything at all. You just only know that they want to look at exercise and bone in stressed rats. But nowadays, the title is like this: voluntary wheel running mitigates the stress-induced bone loss in rats. So the title, if you notice, the science papers often tell you the results already, the finding already in the title. Okay? Another example: to study the influence of hepcidin and vitamin D on calcium transport. Doesn't tell you anything. Hepcidin and vitamin D effectively restore calcium transport in beta thalassaemic mice. See, all the details are there. You know that they did experiment in these anemic mice, beta thalassemia. It's a mutant mice, and they look at hepcidin and vitamin D, and they found that these help restore calcium transport and so on, right? But when you look back, these, the one that we said not good title for the papers, could in fact be the title for the proposal, right? Because you still don't know what's going to happen, okay? So the title of your proposal could be quite general. Another thing that I just kind of recently noticed, so I went back and looked at the title of the papers. And in fact, paper from our lab, my papers from 1972, so you could guess my age now. Most of you are not born yet, right? Okay, and you see that I went back and looked at my publications, and I gave you some example, like 1972, sodium influx at the outer surface of frog skin. This is somebody else's work, actually. In 1984, so it didn't tell you much. Calcium absorption in milk in lactate deficient subject. Kinetics of vitamin D hormone metabolism in the aging rats. Didn't tell you much, right? But these were the titles of the papers in those days, okay? So it's very interesting, because I went back and looked. Things change with time, okay? So nowadays, for example, like 2008, 2009, paper aspirin induces gastric epithelial barrier dysfunction by activating P38, MAP kinase by Claudin 7. All the detail was there. Informative, concise, clear, okay, and specific. The results already told you what the results were. Or vitamin D receptor in chondrocytes, these are the cells which synthesize the cartilage, promotes osteoclastogenesis, the production of the bone resorbing cells, and regulates FGF23 production in osteoblasts, the bone forming cells. All the detail there, the result. So, even the style of writing change with time. So I just use very kind of very different examples to show you that what I tell you today, how to write proposal, what kind of titles we should use. Maybe in 10 years, 20 years' time, it's different. Maybe things will go back like that. Maybe, the title of the paper would be very simple again. So, things change. So there's no cookbook recipe, really, okay? We just use the current preference. So I just tell you now what people would like to use, or what kind of titles people use now, so that you can write it, and then your examiners won't feel too bad about, and also don't feel discouraged or feel guilty or anything if your thesis title has to be changed. It's a norm, okay? Because you haven't done any work, so you propose something very general. But after a while, you might find that, from my example, A to B to C, it might go to A, X, Y, and, eventually to somewhere else. And you might have to change the name of the thesis, which is fine, okay? So don't worry about that. Okay, so thesis proposal should be informative and concise. I give you another example. This is from my lab, actually. Okay, give this one. Neuroprotective effect of voluntary exercise in stressed male rats. So, informative and concise, but not specific, because we still don't know what will happen, okay? Or microstructural change in endochondral cartilage formation in non-obese type 2 diabetic rats. Okay, informative, because the title tells you what kind of animal model we were going to use, and what we were going to look at, microstructure change. But we still don't know what will happen, what we find, okay? So it's not specific. Right, so now let's get into the thesis format, okay? The thesis proposal format. Well, the first two are optional, okay, when you look at a thesis proposal. But list of table and list of figures are useful if you happen to have diagrams that you use in the proposal. It's good to give a list and the page where to find those pictures. But the format starts from chapter 1, which is the introduction, chapter 2, literature review, chapter 3, materials and method. And then you have reference, and may or may not have appendix. Now, chapter 1, the introduction, I think that is the most important part of proposal, because your examiners want to know why you choose this particular topic. Now, when you answer the question why, that's the rationale, okay? The rationale is the reason why you want to do this, or why you want to study that, okay? And introduction, so there will be just a little kind of background, not so much, so the people can place your work, your topic, in a big picture. And then you tell them why you find that interesting and why you would like to do that experiment or that study. And after that, you would have your own idea, the hypothesis, and then the objective. I'll show you later. So chapter 1 is not very big, no, just a small chapter. But chapter 2, literature review, now that is only to provide background knowledge for your readers. Again, you have to think who would be your readers. First of all, your readers are people in your field, right? Because people who read your thesis proposals are people who are interested in your field of work. So the circle, smaller, shrinks a little bit. And also the literature review provides background knowledge for your examiners, okay? Because some examiners may be from a different field of work, not exactly the same, okay? And not from your group of research. So you have to provide relevant information, not too much, because sometimes, the chapter 2, if you have from science anyway, 100 pages is too much, okay? Because just think, poor examiners look at your thesis, your proposal, and you want them to want to read, okay? So don't put too much in it. And you have to select relevant information, background information. That's very important, okay? So I suggest that for chapter 2, you make a list of the subtopics that you want to cover and submit that list to your advisor first. Get approval, because your advisor has experience. Your advisor will help you add or delete some of the subtopics, okay? And then chapter 3, materials method. I mean, that's very technical and depends on your field of work. Reference is very important. Again, not too many, not too little. Now, that reference is a big problem. I get questions about reference all the time. How would you choose references? Do you think that, 50 is too many, 200 too many? And so I can't answer the question because it depends on the context of your work, okay? But a few words about references. Frankly, you're supposed to read those references that you put in your proposal, okay? But what I find very often, most of the time, is that it's not true. Okay, students haven't read every reference they put in their proposal or in their thesis. But I know, easy. We're Thai. We understand English, we read English. But sometimes I will see references from German or Japanese journals, which is obvious that my students haven't read them because they can't, okay? So make sure that even though you haven't read everything, but please try to read all the references that put in, or you know what they're all about. Now, why is that? Sometimes you just put the references from, your former senior student, put these references in chapter 2 in their proposal, in their thesis, and they are important for your work as well, and you use the same, and you never read the original papers. How would you know that they didn't misquote that paper? It happened, okay? Even it happened in publications. I've read some papers and I found some references very interesting. So I went back to search the original papers and I found that the author misquoted or misinterpreted that original paper. And that is serious, okay? So whatever you put in your proposal often eventually translated into your thesis, and that is permanent. So if you make mistake, the mistake is there forever, okay? So try to check the references. And another question that I get is, should I quote or cite the original paper, or should I use or quote the paper that refer to that paper? So I said, if possible, go to the original one. It's better, okay? So, or sometimes in chapter 2, there's so much to cover, and I've just said that not to write too much in the chapter 2, so you might have to cite a review, okay? So sometimes you can use a review as a reference, okay? And that can save time. But again, it depends on the context of your work. So you check with your advisor as well, but you can use review as well, okay? And, okay, appendix, it depends. For us, we prefer to put the detailed methods or the technique, how to make that solution, how to dissolve the hormone or whatever, in appendix. So appendix means that the readers don't have to read them, but if they need to know, they can look it up in the appendix, okay? And actually, I like the appendix because it helps to remind you, the methodology and the detail of something, maybe calculation of the equations or something. You put it there so that you can always look it up in your proposal, okay? So no cookbook recipe, okay? So this is just a very kind of general format. I find this guideline very useful. This guideline is a pamphlet from the Thailand Research Fund. I don't know if maybe they have it in their website. It's very useful. It's a guidelines for writing a good scientific paper, but you can apply this to writing a proposal as well, okay? So I get some information from there for you already. Okay, now let's look at chapter 1, the introduction. Now this chapter 1, that I said, is very important because it gives you a structure, okay, of your work, okay? And so I write here that start with an outline that will form a structure for your chapter. First of all, why is your research important? So that's the reason why you want to select this topic for study, for 2-year study, 5-year study. Okay, so it has to have some importance or significance. And so this is what the readers will get from reading your chapter 1, why your work is important or your plan is important. And what is already known about that topic, what are your hypotheses, and after having establishing the hypothesis, what will you do? So these are your objectives, okay? So these 4 points should be in your chapter 1. So the chapter 1 should familiarize the reader by summarizing pertinent or relevant work in the field, okay? So again, easy to read that sentence, but difficult to do because you have to select relevant work that you want to talk about to give the background to the topic. What is already known about the system that you are investigating? Reference the most important experimental or theoretical previous work, okay? So you have to know how to find information, know how to select relevant information. How is your research significantly different from those described in the other papers? Because to be able to publish, you have to come up with new knowledge. So it has to be something new, okay? But even though, don't worry if you start your work by repeating something which has been done before, that's normal, okay? But then you have to come up with something new. The contribution that your work will have to advancement of science or technology or in your field of work in general, this is optional, but it's nice if you know how, the application of your work, for example, because that will help, it will help your reader to appreciate your work much more, okay, if they can visualize the impact of the work when it's finished. And that part is very important once you have to write a grant proposal, okay? To get money from somebody, you have to convince them why your work is important and the contribution of your work to the field of whatever in your field, right? And then what are the major objectives of your proposal? Because that will lead on to the material methods, okay? Now, there are 5 stages of the introduction. So this is a known thing, okay? I didn't invent it. It's already established fact that when you write introduction, there are about 5 stages of the introduction. If you notice this picture, general to specific, I deliberately put it like, well, it's supposed to be a triangle actually, to show you that you start with something very, very general, a big circle, okay? A big circle. And then once you proceed along the chapter of your introduction, that circle shrinks but becomes more concentrated. Eventually, it will focus on what you're going to do, okay? So that's the image that I want you to get. So first part of the introduction, the chapter 1, general statements about the field of research to provide the readers with a setting for the problem to be reported. So very general, it's all about. For example, if I work with calcium and bone metabolism, and my project maybe is about osteoporosis, I might start by saying that, the world or in Thailand, we are approaching, we are becoming aging population. In fact, we will be a real aging population in 4 years' time, 5 years' time. Okay, so I start with that first. And I will then start to talk about that in aging population, the prevalence of bone disorder is very high. So very general. By that time, people still, the readers still don't know what I'm going to do in my research. But they know that it's about aging population, or it's about bone disease in aging population, okay? I have examples for you later, okay? And after that, you put more specific statements about the aspects of the problem already studied by other researchers. So this is a short review of literatures in the chapter 1, okay? This is not the literature review in chapter 2, this is in chapter 1, but you need to convince them that this has been studied before, something already known about this topic. And then statements that indicate the need for more investigation. And then very specific statement giving the purpose or objectives of the writer's study. You see? So it's in this shape, that very general, and then narrowing down to specific statement giving the purpose or the objectives. And the last one is optional. Optional statements that give a value or justification for carrying out the study. But it would be nice if you can come up with it, okay? But don't make it too ambitious. Make it realistic. Otherwise, that last part might annoy your readers if you put it kind of too ambitious. Maybe your work is like this, and maybe you just predict or speculate that your work will lead on to a Nobel Prize or something, or to cure disease. Sometimes your work may be just part of the mechanism of the disease. Okay, so be careful about that. Right, for the stage 1, the setting, begin with accepted statements of facts related to your general area. For example, in my field, I would say that I might come up with the prevalence of osteoporosis. I might give percentage or number of people who have osteoporosis and so on, okay? So it's accepted statements of facts. And within the general area, identify one subtopic, which includes your topic, okay? So, for example, in my field, I might say, okay, aging population, but once people age, especially in women, they are postmenopausal, they don't have sex hormone, and so they're prone to develop osteoporosis more than other age groups, for example. So I narrow it down, okay? So one sub-area in that particular big topic, and then indicate your topic. For the stage 2, review of literature, information prominent citations refer to research in the general area of your study at the beginning and at the transition points in stage 2. Okay, I think things will be clear once we go to the example. Give citations, because citations refer to studies more closely related to your own. So now you start to go deeper, okay, or your circle narrows down, shrinks, so that you start to talk about works which have been done and are related to your work. It might lead on to your work, okay? But here you have to be specific, give references, so that, be very careful when you choose these references. They have to be real. Make sure you read the papers. I think I put it that way. Make sure that those papers that you cite here at this point, you've read them, okay? Because these are the rationales, are the reasons why you want to do this particular study. So make sure you don't misquote the paper. Very important, because the readers might check on these papers, because for example, we might read these papers so that we would understand what were done before your work, okay? And then use other prominent citation to report specific finding later in stage 2, ordering the citations chronological. This is not necessarily, because sometimes this part may be divided into different paragraphs, because you might have to give background for many parameters, okay, subtopics. But within each subtopic, citation should be chronological in times. You talk about the older work, and then later on somebody found this, somebody found that, and something closer to your work, okay? Stage 3 and 4, specific research problem. Stage 3 indicates an area that is not treated in the preview literature, but is important from your point of view. Stage 4 announces the purpose of your research. And stage 5 indicates possible benefits or applications of your work. Okay, let's, I have some example, old example. Okay, this paper is about using microcomputers in teaching. This is a very old paper, so that was when microcomputer or the desktop computer were just making, a start. So let's look at stage 1, okay? During the past 40 years, the United States has experienced the integration of the computer into society. You see, so very general. You can't guess what they're going to do, okay? If you don't see the title, you don't know. They're just kind of a very general statement. Progress has been made to the point that small, inexpensive computers with expanded capabilities are available for innumerable uses. Okay, from there, right? Computer, okay, and society. And then the circle shrinks a bit, only talk about small, inexpensive computers, not the big one, smaller ones, which can do many things. And then the circle shrinks a bit more. Now, they are talking about small, inexpensive computers and the use in schools, right? See? Many schools have purchased and are purchasing microcomputers for infusion into their directed learning programs. See? The big circle gets smaller, 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 right, to the microcomputers that are used in schools. For the stage 2, okay, so that kind of set a place of the work, okay, all about computer in the United States and the use of these small, inexpensive computers in school. Now for the stage 2, most individuals seem to agree that the microcomputers will continue to hold an important role in education. So you see that this part, they start to have references, okay? So the references is all about how people think about the use of computer in education, right? And so you have this Gubser and Hinton in 1980 suggested that increase in the number of computers both in school and home in the near future. Schmidt in 1982 identified 3 types of microcomputer use in classrooms. See, deeper and deeper. Now the types of use, like object of a course, a support tool, a means of providing instruction. And then in 1982, Foster and Klein cite 4 uses of microcomputer in vocational agriculture: drill and practice, tutorial, simulation, and problem solving. Next, the findings of studies examining the use of various forms of computer-assisted instruction, okay, deeper now into CAI, have been mixed. Studies by Hickey in 1968 and Honeycutt in 1974 indicated superior results with CAI, while studies by Ellis in 1978, Caldwell in 1980, and Belzer in 1976 indicated little or no significant effect. So you see controversy, right? So the issue to show that even though people report this and that, but they still didn't agree, didn't have the same conclusion. So next stage, stage 3. See, although much work has been done to date, more studies need to be conducted to ascertain the effect of microcomputer-assisted instruction in teaching various subjects in a variety of learning situations. See, so now you can start to, I think you started to guess now what this topic is going to be about, okay? And so the purpose, so all the background information, the rationale or the reason is because no conclusion. There's 2 controversies regarding the use of CAI and microcomputer in education. So the purpose of this study was to ascertain the effect of using microcomputer-assisted instruction as compared to a lecture discussion technique in teaching principles and methods of cost recovery and investment credit on agricultural assets to graduate students in agricultural education. So that is the objective of this particular study. And this is the stage 5, the impact, the importance, or they predict the importance. This topic was identified as being of importance to teachers in providing them the necessary background to teach lessons in farm records. So once this study is finished, it would be very useful for this group of people. You see, so this to show you a typical 5 stages of introduction. Okay, so don't forget the big picture, big circle, getting smaller, 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 more focused. And then you have the rationale, and you have the reason why you need to do this topic, okay? And maybe a little speculation about the significance. Another example, okay, this is quite interesting because it's about food buying practices of university student wives. If you look at the topic, you wonder, why would they do that? Why would they study that? Why would they find it interesting, okay? Let's see if you find it interesting or not. So stage 1 and stage 2, again, very wide. Food expense is one of the largest recurring items in the budgets of most families, okay? So this statement tells you what the topic is all about, food expense, okay? Today, food purchases take more than 1/6 of the total consumer disposable income in the United States. This expenditure includes money spent for meals away from home, as well as for food bought for use at home. Many demographic factors affect food buying decisions, including age, education, income, and experience. See, start to give you some idea that, okay, food expense is important, but there's so many factors. It's important because it's 1/6, nearly 20% of the family expense. It's a lot, right? And there's so many factors which can affect food expense. See, you start to have the picture now. Stage 3, however, student wives are a specialized population group about which little is known. So that's the rationale for this particular work, okay? Because nobody looks at this particular population. And stage 4, the purpose of this study was to learn more about the food buying practices of wives of university students. Okay, so that's their objective. And now you may wonder, and what's the use of the information? You know, if after they complete this project, so what? So stage 5, they said, it is hoped that information from this study may be useful in identifying areas of weakness or lack of knowledge to those who are responsible for planning courses and programs in consumer education. So they speculate that their results and their finding would be useful for this group. Okay, so it's quite a simple project that show you quite a nice and clear stages of the introduction. Okay. I'm not going to read it to you, okay? But I just want to give you another example from our work. Expression of prolactin receptors in human osteosarcoma cell. This is the human bone cancer cells. Because we work on prolactin, so you will see that we have one paragraph. First of all, we say that prolactin is one of the most versatile polypeptide hormones of pituitary origin in terms of biological actions. So first of all, just tell them that we're going to work with prolactin, okay, and what prolactin is. And then we have a little more detail. And then we also put lactation, because this is the period that we want to study, and it's the period that prolactin level is high. So I have another one. But within the paragraph, I have the first sentence, which is very general, like lactation in humans and animals is known to induce a maternal bone resorptive state dependent on vitamin D And it has been suggested that prolactin might induce the release of bone resorptive agent. So I start to, my circle shrinks, okay, from prolactin as a hormone which has so many action, right down to the prolactin, which I'm interested in, the action on bone, as a bone resorbing agent, okay? And then I go deeper into not just bone. I'm going to study the effect of prolactin in bone cells, and we use human bone cancer cells as the model. So, you know, shrink right down to focus on the work. Okay, so I hope that these examples give you the general idea about chapter 1, which I said again, that's very important because your readers, the examiner, will understand why you want to do it, what you're going to do, okay? And this chapter, of course, is how you're going to do it, material and methods. I won't go into the detail because methodology, you know, varies according to your work. But you know, the kind of typical is what materials do you use, who are the subjects of your study, what is the design of your research, and what procedure do you follow. Okay, so I won't talk too much about that. For the materials and methods, okay, should be as explicit as possible by providing enough detail and references. Again, references are very important because these are the methods that you will use, okay? The aim of this section is to allow the reader to evaluate the validity of your methodology and to allow other people to repeat your work. Now, because this is a thesis proposal, but thesis proposal eventually, as I said before, will translate into your thesis. And so it's very important that you explain things so that people can repeat your experiments. Okay. For science, work should be reproducible. Okay. Good experiments should be repeatable. Therefore, if, for example, somebody reports something in the paper and some other people try to repeat it again and again and again over the years, and nobody could get the same data, people will start to have doubt, okay? And when people have doubt, sometimes the committee, especially, you know, in journals, at the very end of the journal, they have this kind of comments section, and people start to talk about it, why they got different results from that paper and so on, and they might try to contact the authors. And it happened before, it happened many times, actually, because in various journals that we use anyway, you get paper retraction, which means that they announce that this paper, which was published in, you know, maybe 2 years ago or 3 years ago, is retracted from the journal, which means that they would be removed, okay, even though it was already published, because maybe something was wrong with the experiment. Anyway, we will go over that point later before the end of the talk, okay? So be very careful with your methodology, explain the detail, and if you have too much technical details, put them in the appendix, okay? For example, I use science example, okay? If you write in your method like this, bacteria are pelleted by centrifugation, it's not good enough, okay? Bacteria are pelleted by centrifugation at 3,000 G for 15 minutes at 25 degrees Celsius, okay? That is preferred. To isolate T cells, lymph nodes are collected. Which lymph nodes? How are they collected? It's better to say, to isolate T cells, mediastinal and mesenteric lymph nodes from these mice were collected at day 7 after immunization with ovalbumin, for example. So you give a little more detail so that people would be able to understand as well as to repeat the experiment. And if your method has previously been published and it's well known, you should provide only reference, okay? And people would just look up your reference. For example, stem cells were isolated according to John or whatever, and give reference. Note that passive voice is mostly used in the materials and methods section. Be meticulous and accurate in describing the materials and methods, okay? So this is just kind of its convention that in proposal, the material methods are written in passive voice. For example, like cells are isolated, you don't write like, I will isolate cells by that method, okay? I think it's just convention, okay? Some people do write using active voice. I think it's okay, okay? It's not important point. Okay, this is just to pick a picture to show the thesis proposal from my student, just one example. This is the title, okay, the cover. You have the thesis proposal, and you have the name of the paper, or the, not the paper, your project. Your name, identification, department, faculty, university, and the date. And very important, you must have table of contents. So in the table of contents, for example, in one of my master students, she put introduction, literature review, material method. Some people put chapter 1, introduction, chapter 2, literature review, chapter 3, material methods. You better check with the current format, okay, from the Faculty of Graduate Studies, because sometimes the format may be changed a little bit, so just use the current format. And in introduction, she divided into rationale, hypothesis, objective, which I agree, I think is better, and put the page there. Not just introduction, and then next one, literature review. It's better to put the subtopic so that it's easier for readers to look for information. So here she put, for literature review, diabetes mellitus, endochondral bone formation, growth plate, regulation of growth plate, type 2 DM, and then material method, she just put animals, because we use animals in our experiment in rats. Animals, experimental design, experimental procedure, statistical analysis, don't forget statistics, okay, very important. Statistical analysis, experimental plan, and references with the pages. And of course, if you have appendix, add appendix as well. Now I told my students that when you prepare thesis proposal, don't be too worried, especially when you have the proposal examination. Don't worry too much about it, because this is proposal, you haven't done it yet. And just think of the proposal examination as a session in which people will come and help you, okay? Other specialists will come and help you, help to improve your proposal. So you don't fail proposal easily. Okay, you can try, but you don't fail it easily. First of all, you haven't done it yet. But you need to know, they will ask questions because they want to find out how much you know about your project before you do it. Because if you don't know anything, it will be a waste of time, right? They will say, go back, learn it, come back and tell us again what you know, okay? So the rationale is very important, background information important, and method, that's it. You don't have to worry about the results, okay? So put a lot of effort into the proposal, write it well, okay, prepare it well, because this is more than half of your thesis completed already, even before you start to do your project, okay? So I find that if you've done good homework, you check the background information, you plan well, your thesis, your real thesis, doesn't deviate very much from the proposal, if you're lucky as well, okay? In that case, chapter 1, 2, 3, this is just like the chapters in your thesis already, okay? So if you write it well, you just have to update the references and change this and that a bit, maybe change the methods, add this and that. You just add results and discussion. And that's it, okay? So write it well, which means read well, read a lot, and then be very clear about the rationale of your work and objective. And then from the objective, design the experiment accordingly, okay? So really put effort into writing the proposal. And get somebody to help you with the language if you have a problem with the writing. This is just to show what it looks like, okay, the introduction. But in the chapter 1, at the very end of it, you should have the rationale, okay? The rationale, you can have a list of rationales, or you can have just one small paragraph. After, you know, talking about stage 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, just point it out, make a statement of your rationale so that your readers, especially your proposal examiners, would understand why you want to do this, okay? And then have your hypothesis, and then objective. And for the material methods, again, it depends on your field of work, but for us, we have animals, so we explain why we have to use koto, kakisaki, GK rats. We have to use this. These are type 2 diabetic rats, which are not obese. You see, because we study how the cause of osteoporosis, the bone disease, which occur in diabetic patients. Okay, but we use these particular animals because type 2 diabetic patients are often overweight, and the weight of the body, you know, body weight, does affect bone. And we don't want weight bones. We have to use a model which has type 2 diabetes but doesn't have weight gained. And that's why we have to order these rats. So we have to explain where we got the rats from and why we use them. And then the grouping of the animals, experimental plan. Now what I want to show you here is that, for us anyway, we like to put a kind of timeline diagram to show, because even though all these procedures we already explained in the text, but think of the examiners or somebody who read your proposal. It will help them to use diagram. It's easier to see in the diagram, okay, day 1, what do you want to do with the animals, this day 3 to, or whatever, or week or minutes or whatever that you want to do, okay? So have a timeline and the procedure or the experimental protocols fit in. It's useful. And the very last part, in the format, you also often have experimental plan. So this is activities, and this is, let's say this is a master's student. You have year, okay, the first year, the second year. And normally, this is a, I always make this comment, I don't like it at all, but it's a format that we have to use. Because most students will just put preliminary study, okay, first few months, then proposal preparation, proposal presentation or exam, laboratory technique, laboratory work, data analysis. This is writing, manuscript preparation for publication. This is defense. Very boring. And you know, it's typical. And in fact, quite often, you know, this doesn't mean anything. Okay, but if you can plan ahead, but I think you need to put it, okay, so that, but if possible, put more detail in. For example, if you already have, let's say, you're going to plan your work into 3 parts, and you know how long the first part should take, maybe, you know, like 3 months or 4 months or 6 months, put it down, like, you know, experiment, part 1, the name of the experiment, and then a little more detail. So that this experimental plan or the year plan would have more meaning, not just a format. This is what I comment to my student, that this is hopeless. I mean, it doesn't tell me anything. How would you know that you're going to get publication by the end of the second year? But I want more detail here. So it is better for you to practice planning, detailed plan, by putting the time, the duration of each experiment, each study, and try to keep to the timeline. Okay, it will help you to make sure that you finish everything in time. And it's a good practice as well, because once you've graduate and you work in universities or anywhere, and if you need to write a proposal, a grant proposal to a granting agency, this is very important. This table is very, very important. Why? Because they would expect you to write a detail of, which part of the experiment you're going to complete in 2 months, 3 months, expected outcome or output. You have to speculate accurately, because once you get the grant, you have to send 6-month progress report. Okay, every 6 months you have to send the progress report, and there will be a committee who will look at your proposal compared to your progress report, and they will spend time looking at the detail of this and see whether you have already committed, right? You have promised them that you're going to finish this particular experiment with this outcome or that output. So they will compare. And if you can't deliver, you have to give a very good excuse or reason, okay, to get further financial support. So you might as well start practicing now with your proposal. And it is good, because from time to time you come back and look at it and see, oh dear, I'm behind, or oh, I'm okay, as planned. So try to put as much detail as possible, okay? But make it realistic, okay? Okay, so that's it about writing the proposal. Now the last part, maybe half an hour or something, I would like just to share with some other points that you might find interesting, okay, from my own experience and from being with students. And also I will quote, quotations from other great scientists as well. So how to succeed in science, I'm sorry, how to succeed in what? What word should I use? How to succeed in your career, okay? Because it will apply to everything. Mind and body, you need both, okay? I quote Professor Lipscomb. Professor Lipscomb was a Nobel laureate in chemistry in 1976, and he came and became a Satamongkonsuk distinguished professor at our Faculty of Science, and he used to spend about 6 months teaching biochemistry and mentoring research. He was about 80-something, when he came, spent time with us. And somebody asked him, what is your best science? What is your best work? Which one that you was most proud of? And he said, I haven't done it yet. And everybody kind of, we didn't laugh. We thought, wow, what did he mean by that? He meant that at 80, after receiving Nobel Prize in chemistry, he still works very hard. He still drives for excellence. And so he thinks that he can even do better. And he was 80 when he said that. So I like this very much, and I want to share with you, because, you always have to have this enthusiasm, and you want to know, and a motivation forever, indefinitely, okay? Steve Jobs said, to be successful is to love what you do. So besides having motivation, enthusiasm, you have to love what you do. So for those who are not too, too excited about your work, or not quite sure whether I like what I'm doing, is not, you have to do it. You might as well love it, what you do, okay? You can kind of tell yourself, or start learning more about it, and then talk about it. And I think you can start to love what you do. I think that's one way to become successful. You have to love what you do, okay? And Stephen King is an author. He writes some ghost story as well as some thrillers. He said, what separates the talented individual from the successful one is a lot of hard work. I like that too. So it's just motivation, passion, enthusiasm, love, and hard work. Okay? Right, and this is from Professor Edward Wood from Cambridge. He said the outcome desired in a science student, sorry, so it's not a science student, from a graduate student, okay, is broad knowledge, understanding of discipline, more in-depth knowledge in a specific area, read, and read, okay? Ability to read scientific or read literature and find information. And then, so these you train yourself during the coursework, right? And later on, when you start to your project, ability to operate efficiently, effectively, and safely, especially when we work in the lab. Ability to analyze data, applying statistics, search, database, very important, applying resource, and be critical. And ability to present data orally and in writing, using graph, table, etc. So this is how to communicate. And 6, ability to focus, total concentration on one problem for 2 to 5 years at least. Okay, so you definitely have to love what you do, okay, to be able to stick to it, or stick with it for 4 or 5 years, especially when you do a PhD. And the last one, most important, ability to continue lifelong learning. As I said right at the beginning of the talk, that research trains you in many ways, and one is that you will find that you will hunger for knowledge and you will know how to learn. It's a lifelong learning all the time. Okay, so 4 requirements for a successful career in science: knowledge, technical skill, communication, originality, and creativity. Which one is the least important in your idea? 1, 2, 3, or 4? Which one is the least important in your idea? Can you put up your hand? I mean, I don't have answer for you, okay? I just want to know how you think. So can you put up your hand if you think knowledge is the least important? Nobody. Technical skill? Go on. Okay, a few. Communication? A few more. Originality or creativity? Interesting. And for those who don't put up your hands, none of them. Or all of them are important. Who thinks that all 4 are equally important? Yeah. Quite a lot of you. Okay, I don't have any answer to that. But from what I read, the article, it says that originality and creativity, some people say that you're born with it. You either have it or you don't. I don't argue with that, okay, because I think we can go on forever if you argue about that. But I would say that, yes, it's partly inborn. Some people are so creative, and some people are pretty hopeless, can't even draw, you know, a circle, for example. But I think you can be trained, because some people, you have originality and you have creativity, but you don't know where it is. You haven't found it yet. So sometimes you need somebody to help you find it. Okay, I think everybody has a certain amount of originality, creativity, but you might need somebody to help you to look for and make use of it. So this one, you have to spend time looking for it and then train it. Knowledge, I think we all agree, yes. For me, technical skill Yes and no. While you are doing your study, yes, you need the technical skill, right? Because you have to hands-on. But you know what? I don't have technical skill now because I can't do the experiment now and see. You know, I used to be able to cannulate the blood vessel in the leg, okay, femoral vessel of a rat when I was doing my project. It's tiny, and I could do it with naked eye. Okay, I do that every day. Well, I did, not sorry, I don't do it anymore, I did. And I had to stop because I couldn't see. So I did it under a kind of microscope. But now I can't do it because my hand will shake. Okay, I'm just too old for all these technical skills, for example. So to me, at my stage, technical skills with the hands-on not important, but I have to oversee things, the whole project. I have to know the methodology, the principle of the methodology, but my students are better hands-on. Okay, so for me, technical skill is not important at my stage, but I have to know the techniques because I have to advise my students. Okay. Communication. Communication is very important, believe me. Okay? When I say communication, it doesn't mean just talking. Communication in writing, so you have to write papers. So when you are, when you have a career, you should be able to communicate the outcome of your work to other people as well. It's very important. So communication is important. And especially for students, graduate students like you, you have to learn both in writing and oral presentation, okay? And you need a lot of training. So get your supervisor to help you. I think it's better, for example, in our lab, okay, we always have, I'm going to talk about later actually, lab meeting and journal club. And we train people to present paper, you know, not his or her paper, but she can pick a paper. You train yourself to present work in front of a small group, okay, your peers first. Or you have to train yourself to give seminar. That is the training in communication. It's very important. Okay. If you are really good in your career, in profession, but you can't communicate, then your work is not appreciated by other people. Okay, so when I say communication, it involves every type of communication. So all four are very important, but each one is probably less important at a certain stage of your life. Okay. I'd like to. I always have this in the internet. Okay, it's called Clear Science. Okay, and I get this every week, and there will be nice, useful tips because I teach my students at the department how to read scientific papers or how to write proposal, how to write paper. So I always get these interesting tips. And in fact, I think it was September the 2nd, I got this. It's from this person, and she suggested that writing tip, okay, pre-writing, try to think in English. So it's all about people like us, many of us who don't use English as our mother tongue. She said that after winning the Nobel Prize for Medicine in 1987, Professor Susumu Tokigawa wrote to all his colleagues in Japan telling them to learn English. Because as you know, Japan, especially in the old days, they didn't use English, okay, even though they had to communicate their work in journals and so on. This professor thought that the ability to think in English had made a great difference to his work. You should try from the beginning to use English, write the thesis statement in English. Constant referral to this English summary of the paper will help you to start to think and construct your arguments in English. take your notes in English as you write each section. You could even keep your lab notes in English. This would force you to study a little scientific English every day. If you can begin to do this, the logical flow of your writing will be clearer, and your English will rapidly reach a new level of fluency. That when only the final version of a paper is translated into English, no matter how good it is later, the flow of ideas and structure of the arguments are often not scientific English. And I've noticed, because I have to correct my students' thesis, because they write thesis in English. And, you know, they try, even though the sentence is grammatically correct, but the sentence just doesn't sound English, because sometimes we Thai have the way that we talk, or we write reason and cause and reason in kind of reverse order from English. So sometimes the sentence is correct, but it doesn't sound English, and I have to change that. And it's very difficult to explain to my student, but if they read a lot, so I just keep on telling them that read a lot, because once you read a lot, you train your brain to understand the flow of English, and it will help you. So I think that's I'm going to show that to my student too. Okay, another point that I think might be useful to you, again, this is from my experience, okay? So it might not suit everybody. How to manage time. To me, okay, I keep diary. In other words, I have my desk diary on my table, so it's there all the time. And I have another diary in my bag, and I have, of course, my appointment diary in my phone. I have to have 3 sources, because in case I lose my phone or my phone hangs or something, I'm not lost. Because some people have everything in the phone, and then if it doesn't work, then you don't know what you're going to do today. Okay, or the appointments or things that we have to do. So I have been keeping this diary, work diary, on my desk since I was a student, and I found that it's very useful because you have your roadmap. I would know what I'm going to do every day, and I would know in advance what I will have to do in 2 weeks' time or 3 weeks' time. For example, if I have to plan my PhD qualification exam, I will work back. The exam would be in September, for example. I would work back months, and I would look at all the topics that I have to prepare for this written exam, and I would divide the time, and I would leave a few days so that I would have time to revise second time, things like that. So I would put the dates, on certain day that I will have to start preparing this topic, read that topic, and I will try to keep to that schedule, okay? So to me, it's just like having my own roadmap. Nowadays, I still have it, the diary is on my desk. So my students can, if I'm not in the room, let's say today I'm here, but if somebody call me and want to set a meeting or something, my student would look on my diary. Okay, oh yes, okay, Ajahn is free on that day, so she will just write something in pencil for me. So I can confirm that later. But I would know exactly what I'm going to do today, tomorrow, in 2 weeks' time. And each day will be divided, because the diary is already divided into, the time, hours. It will be that detail. And I find that if I do that, I can get things done effectively, efficiently as well. So I have my daily timetable, and it's a very nice feeling to tick off what you've done that day. For example, on a certain day, like yesterday, I had to prepare exam questions for a certain course that I will teach. I taught yesterday, okay, the lectures, but the day before, I was going to prepare the question. So I gave myself 2 hours, okay. And once I finished, I get tick off. It's always a nice feeling, at the end of the day, what you have accomplished, even though they are small things, but it's nice. But if I can't finish a particular one, I just kind of put an arrow and say, this is important and urgent, I have to do it tomorrow. And so I have to readjust my timetable, okay? So, as I said, plan can be readjusted, deadline can be reset, and your position reevaluated. So you know what you're doing all the time, and you know what you will do in the near future. Now for you, it's important to keep your advisor informed of the progress of your work, as well as where you are on that day, that particular day. If you happen to be busy and you're not coming in or something, let your advisor know. Leave a note or give him or her a call or something. Okay, don't disappear too long. We all have the same 24 hours, but if we planned it well, I think that your 24 hours could be more efficient than somebody else's 24 hours. Okay, this is a picture of my diary, just one page. Okay, so I wrote down like Monday what I have to do, and for example that one I have to write a proposal. So I need the whole afternoon, and so on. Okay, so I find it very useful. So I just advise my students to do the same thing. I don't know whether they do it or not. Okay, another small topic that I would like to cover very briefly is the ethics in research. I think in every field of work, what is ethics? This is the philosophy of what is right and wrong. Okay, research is the attainment of new knowledge and current truth of our state of knowledge. We use the word current truth because sometimes, we from our research we find something, we report it. It's the truth of that particular time. It might be proved wrong later on, which is okay. It's not wrong, okay? But make sure it's the current truth of the state of the knowledge. It means truthfulness, honesty. Now, I've read a lot of articles about ethics in journals, and they think that we means the world, our era, we're having problem. And this is because now we have intense competition for recognition by peers and by general public. Research or success from our career could mean prizes, getting prizes, could mean commercial benefit, financial benefit. And so the competition for all these different types of awards is so strong that ethics is something which is not white or black or white. It's kind of grayish now. So it's quite worrying that all these is slowly eroding the scientific ethic or ethics in your field of work as well. So we have to be very, very careful, okay? And be very truthful to oneself. Issues that are critical to data integrity include falsification of data. These two, fabrication of data. Falsification of data, for example, sometimes people falsify the data without knowing it, okay? Because, for example, in experiments, you might start to select the data without good reasons. That could be falsification of the data, because the data that you present in your work, in your thesis, is not the real one, okay? Fabrication of data is just to make it up. I mean, that is really serious, but both of them are serious. Plagiarism now is also very serious. So if you use somebody's work, you have to give citation, give the reference, give the source of the information that you get. For Mahidol University now, we are very strict about Ajahn when they have their academic promotion to be assistant professor, associate professor, professor. When they, for example, they submit a review articles or book chapters or books, we have to check and see that there's no plagiarism. Sometimes they would use other people's results to incorporate into their work, but they didn't put the reference where the information comes from. Even when you use pictures and things from the net, you still have to write down the website, okay? So be very careful. It's best if you can produce your own diagrams, the graph, the picture, take the photographs yourself or something. It's safer. Even when you use somebody's work from published paper, you still have to write and ask permission from the publisher, not from the authors, from the publishers, because that belongs to the publisher, publishing company, okay? So if you use it in your thesis, quite often you don't have to pay, but sometimes you do. So you have to be very careful, okay? Suppression and selection of data, that's supposed to be unethical as well. Misuse of privileged information. Poor data quality. My students are surprised when we talk about ethics and you know, poor data quality is unethical. So that means that when you work, when you do research, you have to do it properly, correctly, okay? And if say in the lab, you're sloppy and you know, you have the data that terrible, the graph and you know, it's really bad, and then, but that's your work and you present it in your proposal, that's unethical, because who knows that if you did the experiment properly, really, you know, be very careful with it, you might get another result, a different result altogether, right? So this is like, in a way, it's like falsification of data, because they're not the real data, even though you didn't have the intention of, you know, falsifying the data. So poor data quality is bad as well. Abuse of human subjects and abusive animal use. Nowadays, even when I use animal, we have to submit the proposal to the ethics committee, and all of us who handle animals, both staff and students, have to take a special course in animal handling. Have to know all the details so that we will use as few animals as possible, and we only use them when we, you know, have no other choices. And we have to be very careful to make sure that it's least painful, and so on. Okay, so this is very serious for all of us. This is an example to show you that, because nowadays you're lucky to have, you know, all this information available to you in the internet. And for example, Mahidol University spent millions and millions of baht buying the right to all these journals that you can search online. Very useful. But when you have a lot of information available, you have problem of selecting the information, right? You don't know which one to believe. Especially, I'm not sure about art side, but for science, now we have lots of open access journals. And you probably know that a lot of them are not real journals, okay? They're fake. So you have to be very careful. We have what we call Beale list. Beale is a guy in America, in one of the big, the library in the big universities, who literally spend time and effort to go after all these fake publishing companies and journals, and came up with a list which is being re-edited all the time. Okay, so we rely on Beale list a lot because we believe them. Okay, they have a team to go, and we don't publish in journals which are on the Beale list. For example, there may be a very kind of high impact journal in science called Cell, for example, and then suddenly you have a journal called Cells with an S. And you know, for people who don't know the difference, would go maybe would try to publish in Cells, but that one is a fake one, because they only establish it to get money. Because for open access, you pay to publish, okay, and then we read it for free. But for the other journals, sometimes you pay not so much, and then but you have to pay to read the journals. But nowadays, I think eventually all the big publishing companies will go towards open access because it's cheaper. But again, you have to be very careful, okay, and very selective. Within your own field, you can check with your supervisor which journals are not, or which journal you should publish in or read, okay? So be very careful. This hijacked journal, this is the fake one. I read it. This is from, I think I got it from American Journal of Physiology. And they gave you an example of some, it's a big business. They came up with the fake journals. They came up with fake papers, fake authors, and even fake international meeting, which did not take place. So nowadays, it's very difficult to know what to believe. And this is another example of a journal, a paper which was published in American Journal of Physiology, Cell Physiology. For us, American Journal of Physiology is a very high impact journal in my field. And this one was published, I think, in 2007, but it was only in, published in 2007, but only in 2013 that it was retracted because somebody tried to repeat the experiments over the years, over the 4 or 5 years. Nobody could get the same result. So there was some investigation. And eventually the university set up a committee to look into this. And they found that it was falsification. For those who do PCR would know that this, they just falsify. Okay, I think they just did something to the gel. So these were okay. So the committee told, make announcement, the retraction, and show which one was the fake one, the gel. Okay, and we nearly the end of my talk. Additional notes. Doing research in Thailand and overseas, this is a question I get from my Thai students, okay? So for you, the question might be, doing research in Thailand or in America, in Europe, in more developed countries from us? Well, each has its own advantage and disadvantage. For me, because I would say that I did most of my research in Thailand because I came back to do my master and my PhD here, and also my research career. And I would say that most of my publications, I have about 120 international publications. I would say 90% of my publications were done in Thailand with a Thai group, with the Thai authors, okay? Only a few recently published by my PhD students who got the RJG scholarship, the PhD scholarship, so that they could spend a year abroad. So they got papers from abroad with from the lab abroad. Anyway, and I found that it's an advantage, as I said before, because it's difficult to do research here. Okay, in science especially, because we don't have all the equipment and some are outdated, but it makes us think, because we have to plan instead of, for example, if I have to plan, I'm going to walk from there to my goal, but because I don't have equipment, this high-tech equipment, I have to plan, so that I have to go that way first and that way. So I always have more than one plan for my experiments, and that kind of imprints on me that whenever I do anything with my life, I will have two plans. In case one doesn't work, it doesn't matter. I go to another one. Okay, so we are patient as well, because now we have lots of new staff coming back from completing PhD abroad or postdoc training abroad, came back to the faculty, and some of them just said, I couldn't do anything. There's no equipment. There's, back there in our lab, we had all these big equipments, but now we don't have the equipment. I can't do anything. So quite often I talk to them, and I said, but you have this, okay, with you. So you don't need equipment. You don't have equipment. You have to have this, your own equipment, okay, and think about what you can do. Do some simple project. Okay, come up with a new project that, and look around in the faculty, what are the equipments that you can use. Okay, so that's the advantage of you have to think more, work harder. For example, me to publish, I have to compete with the others, bigger labs. That means we have to submit more data, more results to get published, which is fine. I think it's good for us. Okay, so I'm a positive person. So I think being positive helps you to overcome problems already. Okay. I'm a super technician. Sometimes, even though you have been assigned to the lab of Dr. X, okay, and the project is there, because it happens all the time, because now the staff, like me or Adan, we get grant, research grant, so we already sent a proposal, research proposal, which is approved, and we commit ourselves to that particular research, which means that students who come into my lab will have to do those experiments or those projects. But it doesn't mean that my students are my technician, because they still have to think. Even though they have to do this project, but they still have to read, they have to think, and that project, within that small circle, they still have to plan, they have to solve problems, they have to learn the technical skills, they have to learn everything that research can teach them within that small circle, okay, or small frame. So, super technician, I mean that they don't think. You just tell them what to do, and they do it, and deliver you the data, and you look at the data, you interpret the data. That's not what students are supposed to do. Okay, so make sure that you don't become a super technician. Plan every step ahead of time. I don't know about some of the field of work, but if you use a lab, okay, science lab, you must have a lab book. Now, lab book is very important because you write everything in there, and the lab book should be left in the lab, so that advisor can, if the student's not there, I can just walk there to the desk, pick up his or her lab book, open it, and I will see what she has done over that week and what she did yesterday, for example, and the comment and all that. Okay, so lab book is very important. This is just example I borrowed from my PhD student. She just started the lab, and so that's the cover of her book with her name and her identification, and she just kind of print out of what she did. Okay, some preparation, and that's the Western blot protocol for measuring the protein, analyzing protein. So she just put it in a way that she could understand it. Okay, but lab book is something for not just for the owner of the lab book to read, for advisor and other people as well. So you have to make sure that you write it down and it's readable. Okay. And for example, she just put some result, just put a piece of result in there, and she even put that is a little, because she have to grow cells on a particular membrane, so she want to put it's a piece of paper on the box when she order the membrane, so that she would know the company that she order the membrane from, and the size of the pore, so the detailed property of the membrane, so that she wouldn't forget. If she has to order again, then she just put that piece of paper sticking onto her lab book. So the lab book is very informative. It tells you all about what is being done in that experiment of that person. Lab book is so important that, strictly speaking, when students leave, when students graduate, they should leave the lab books and the data book in the lab, because it's called lab book. It's not student book, it's lab book. And this is important. They might make a copy and take it, but it's important to leave it because, for example, if you publish a paper of the student's paper, and if there's any problem, somebody might want to look at the raw data, or might want to check the technique, the concentration of the hormone use or the solution, composition, the solution, whatever, which is all, everything is in the lab book. Okay, so lab book should be left in the lab after students leave. And I often ask my students, because we have the lab meeting, and from time to time, every 4 or 5 months, I would ask students to bring your lab book and show each other the lab book and have a competition and see whose lab book is the best. Probably get a little gift from me or something. It's very funny because sometimes I look at the lab book and there will be a little face with tears rolling down because experiment didn't work on that particular day, and she was in such a bad, sad mood that she drew herself with the tears rolling down. Or another page you might see, a very happy face, good results today or something. But I said, okay, that's fine. It's just put anything there, but don't put the date. Okay, and also, if, for example, you put, let's say, you wrote down the procedure of the experiment with the date on that day, and if you change it, you might come back and adjust your experiment, and you change the composition of the solution, for example. Cross that out, put the new composition of the solution down, put the date as well. Okay, so we know when you change the this and that. So some people have a very good lab book, and we can actually trace the results. When I look at the results for the data, the raw data, and I said, something's wrong with this point, this dot. Okay, this result, can we see what happened on that day? And she would have the code. That one is the rat number so-and-so of the which date. And we can go back and see, maybe when she did the operation, it was too much bleeding or something, okay? And so that's supposed to be very good lab book, very informative, okay? And again, my student put the gel, not very good, she was learning how to do it, so. Okay, additional notes. Besides the lab book, journal club. Okay, for us, we have journal club every week. I have, at the moment, I have 7 students in my lab. Normally we have about 10, 11, but at the moment it's 7. So what we do is we ask students to take turn. Student will pick one paper that she thinks or he thinks is interesting, and then we all read 1 week in advance, and on a particular day, morning, it takes about 3 hours to do each journal club. That person will brief us the background information for that paper, and then we will all work together. I will just sit back and I let them do it, okay? The one who picks the paper would be like the manager of that particular day, or instructor, and she will ask questions. It could be the youngest student, it doesn't matter, they take turn. And she will ask, okay, somebody tell me what's the rationale of this paper. Okay, and they will come up with ideas, and they might argue and all that, objective, talk about the methods, and interpret the data, and I will just help them add more questions, for example, or when they get stuck with something that I help explain. So it's a very, very good atmosphere. It's a sharing and learning from each other, and also they learn how to analyze scientific papers, and they learn how to communicate. We do that in English, so they practice speaking English as well. Okay, so among your group, if there's only 1 or 2 of you in the group, maybe you can have a journal club with somebody next door to you, or gather together. You can have Ajahn with you or without Ajahn, it doesn't matter. But it's nice to be able to share information and learn how to communicate and learn how to criticize paper. Okay, quite often at the very end of the paper, I would ask, okay, give me comments. Please comment this paper. Would you like it? Why do you like it? Why don't you like it? And how would you improve it if you were the authors? Things like that. Okay. And we have lab report as well. So we every week we have, every 2 weeks we would have a lab report. Okay, and then the journal club. And lastly, don't wait for your advisor to call you go and find her or him. Okay, very important. Keep in touch with your advisors. And to do good is not enough. Go for excellence. So good luck, everybody. You can do it. Okay, you can do it well as well. So I hope I've shared with you some experience. I hope the information is useful to you. If you have any questions and comments, please, you can use the microphone. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your interesting presentation. I would like to ask, could you explain in the introduction, in the chapter 1, you mentioned about the rationale. Can you explain more about the difference between rationale and conceptual framework? Thank you very much.
Okay, the rationale is the question why. So before you have the conceptual framework is what you're going to do. It's more like objective plus a little more detail what you're going to do. But why would you like to do? Why would you like to study that? Is the rationale. For example, from my work, okay, why I would like. I study the effect of, as I said, a hormone. No, okay. One project, maybe it's easier. I study the cause of osteoporosis, which is the bone, low bone mass, okay, bone disease, in diabetes. So that's my work. Then you wonder, why would I do that? Why would I look at diabetes? Is all about, you know, body weight, sugar in the blood, right? But why would you look at the bone? So the rationale, the reason why I'm interested in doing this research is because, number one, diabetes is #1 endocrine disorder in Thailand. Okay, that's my rationale number one. Number two, there has been a lot of reports of osteoporosis in diabetic patients. And number three, maybe if I want to add it, nobody has looked at the cause of bone disease in diabetes before. So nobody knows whether bone disease is independently caused by something, or is it due to high sugar in the blood, or is it due to the lack of insulin, or whatever. So nobody knows. So these are three rationales. Is it clearer now? The reasons. It's the question why. Why is a rationale. Objective or the conceptual framework is what you're going to do. What. And the material method is how you're going to do it. So it's why, what, and how. That's the proposal. Okay? Any other question, comments? Do you want to exchange information, ideas? Maybe you want to tell me how good your advisor is, how you love your project. But it's a good sign. I see lots of smiling faces, which means you're quite happy with whatever you're doing, right? Happy is not enough. You have to love doing it. You have to have passion. Okay, I think somebody is more hungry than passionate about work. Okay, huh? Okay.
Okay, my name is Irwan Rahade. I'm from Indonesia. I just want to know the feeling of our advisor. I have a plan to conduct my research in halal tourism that is related to some ones of the religions. So I just care to start my research when I'm sorry because in my advisor believing it's different with me. how to the question is how to notice the advisor feeling that I conduct my research that is different, quite different in the field. Thank you. That is a not problem, or it's will getting the problem with our relation. Thank you.
I think you just have to talk advisor. I don't know how often you talk to your advisor, but I think everything, you know, all the problems or understandings, everything will come out from talking, communication. So I think you need to, first of all, you have to be sure what you want to do. You have to, first of all, advisors don't like students come to ask questions without any background knowledge. Okay, so advisors in general prefer to have students who have done the homework before and know what they're talking about. And so when they come and ask questions, they ask specific questions to show that, at least show that they've done some work before. Okay, so but advisors, well, it depends on the personalities or character of the advisor. But I personally, I'm quite a kind advisor, but I will tell my student off if they come and ask me silly questions, something that they should look it up themselves, okay? So I'd prefer them to prepare the material first and come and talk to me. And I would be very, try to understand the objective of the person, of the student. So I think in your case, because I don't know the detail of your work, maybe you can talk to me afterwards, after class or something, after meeting. But I think you just have to talk to your advisors and then ask him or her how he or she feels about this project, even the little problem. And if you don't, if your advisor doesn't have time at all and you don't have a chance to meet the person, you have co-advisors. Maybe co-advisors can help you. But you just have to talk to them and ask them directly how they feel about this or that, okay? Don't leave the issue undiscussed. Because you know, when you work, when you do research, you can discuss about anything, really. Okay, so talk it out with your advisor or co-advisors. Okay. I think in your case, in a lot of people's cases, because you are working in a foreign country, and sometimes our cultures are different. So, you know, you can't tell. And people can be very sensitive sometimes. So, so you just have to talk. I think your advisor or your peers, people around you, will be able to help and make suggestions, advise you how to go about. Okay.
Please raise your hands if you have questions. So let's benefit from this workshop, right? So we have about half an hour each time.
No, we don't have to stay until 12.
Okay. Okay.
When we finish, it's okay. I will assume that no questions means that my talk is very clear. Okay, I count 1 to 10. Question? 1? 10. Okay, no question.
Maybe I can ask a question.
Okay.
So in terms of selecting or choosing our advisor, like for example, for me, I chose old experienced Ajahn as my main advisor, and young, very enthusiastic one as my co-advisor. So definitely there could be this combination to make your supervising team more effective, right? And at the same time, give them more time. So like I defended my proposal, and then in the process of writing my thesis, and they say at least give 2 weeks, before sending your draft, because it takes time for adjuncts and external examiners to read your paper and to give you really quality comments. So how would you comment on these?
I think you're very lucky to have such an interesting combination of advisors. Yeah, I think, but sometimes you don't have any choices, but Yeah, to choose co-advisors is quite important too. I didn't mention that, but try to choose co-advisors who can literally help you. You know, because sometimes, from my experience, sometimes we just choose co-advisors who are more or less in the same group, and because it's convenient to have meetings and things, but it's not really exciting, and it's a little bit more inbred. So maybe, you know, get co-advisors from somewhere else, so you get new ideas, which is, I think, is better. Even though sometimes it's very difficult to set up a meeting or progress report meeting or something, but do make use of your co-advisor as well. Use them, okay, for advice. And of course, you should send or submit your proposal at least 1 week. I'd say 2 weeks is good before the actual examination, because you know, we don't have time, so we don't want to read, you know, just the overnight, the night before. So you never know. Sometimes you send them, you know, 2 weeks in advance. They probably read the night before. But anyway, at least on your part, you've done well. And I think, what was the other point I was going to mention? Oh yes, something about, okay, the other day my student said that she had to order a chemical, very important chemical, which will not arrive for another 2 weeks. And she said she had to stop the lab for 2 weeks. I was a bit upset, so I said, don't worry, I mean, you know, you can't do anything, you have to wait anyway. That's one disadvantage of doing research in Thailand, okay? We have to wait for the company to deliver the chemical. So I said, go and write your thesis. And she looked at me. Yeah, write your thesis. How about chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3? Even though you haven't finished your thesis, your experiment, you can start writing. You know, don't waste time, 2 weeks. You go and write your chapter 1, at least chapter 2, but I think chapter 1, write it first, because that is your framework. Chapter 1 is very important. You can always change it, you know, kind of adjust it, modify it a bit. But go and write it. So she does. I'm waiting, because the next week I'm asking to see, I'm going to read it. So she would, you know, I don't want the whole proposal or thesis to be sent to me and I correct it. I want it chapter by chapter. So my student always send, you know, whenever they finish writing. So I said, chapter 2, go and write it and try to finish in 2 weeks. So by the time, you know, the chemical comes, she would have finished at least 2 chapters already in her thesis. So no time wasting, okay? You can always, everyone can start writing your thesis. By writing your proposal properly, that's your thesis already. Okay? Yes? MC, we need microphone, please. Can you shout? Yes, sorry.
Perhaps a bit of more clarity of what is good and bad advisor in terms of what students should expect. Because we do have a lot of information what expected from the student. So that, I think, that is not less important in the sense of choosing advisor and then sticking to it. So, thank you.
Okay. Well, nobody's perfect. Okay, so for example, I think, to me, when I was a student, I was lucky to have my advisor, Professor Leng Chai Lim Lam Wong, who was my mentor, still is my mentor. Okay, he's retired. But anyway, he's a good advisor. Why? Because, first of all, he made me work. But he's kind. He was very kind, because when I had any problem, I could go to him and you know, he would give me advice. He didn't treat me like a technician. So he made me work, but he was very kind, because at the very beginnings, I remember that I had absolutely no idea how to do research, because that was when I did my master's degree, right? I didn't have any experience doing research before. So I asked stupid questions, but he never kind of looked down on me. He would answer every question. He would teach me how to read, how to criticize paper, how to read scientific paper. And I learned from him, and that's why I think it's very important to help students, not just in the lab, not with the technical skill, but to help them with everything, actually. I would like an advisor who maybe he doesn't have, the person doesn't have much time, but once set a meeting, keep to the meeting, and always find time for the students. I know nowadays this is a big problem, time. A lot of people, advisors, ajahns are busy, but to me, student comes first. So other work will have to wait. But of course, because I have my diary, I would have meetings which I cannot miss. So students would know that even though I said students come first, but that meeting has been set in advance, so I will have to meet students some other time. So good advisor must have enough time for the student. When I say enough time, it could be 1 hour, it could be 1 week, it could be whatever. Should be available to the students. Okay, that's one important thing, because I think you need time. And also have to be able to help students. And if the advisor cannot help student, get help from somewhere else. Okay, don't leave the student lost. I think that's important. I think students must not feel lost. If advisor can't help, he must be able to give advice, go and see somebody, or in fact contact somebody to help the student. I think you should be able to tell me what kind of advisors that you would like. But I think the most important thing is, first, you have time, you put your student as a priority, and you're kind. Because sometimes students, you might think that students are very ignorant, they don't work hard, but sometimes you have to go deeper to see the real problem students have. Sometimes students may have other personal problem. From my own experience, I find that sometimes students look like they were not working hard, so I ask them what's wrong. And sometimes you have to go deeper to the real problem. And I say, don't worry, you stop work, go back home for a week, solve the problem, okay? Let me know if I can do anything and help, and then come back. It's no use, continue working with the problem like that. Bad advisors, advisor who put his or her own goal before students. Okay, we are ajahn. We are supposed to, one, we have to teach, and we have to do research, our own research, okay? And the other one is just to do academic service. So these are actually we have 4 tasks that we are committed to perform. But I think a lot of, I found, what I've seen, to me, a bad advisor first never had time for students, me first, which I think is wrong. But again, student, on your part, also have to say that not always me first. You have to think and understand the other burdens of or responsibility of your ajahn as well. Number 2 is when ajahn treats you like a technician. I think that's very bad, which means that he or she doesn't teach you, but tells you, order you to do things. And you don't learn anything while doing that, because you have to do it according, everything was thought out for you already. So you never had time to train yourself to think. I think that's bad. Okay, the way you treat your student as a technician. What else? I think they're just small things. good advisor can have very bad student, things won't work out. Bad advisor can have good students and things don't work out. So it's either way. I think you just have to be, first of all, I think you have to understand each other and open your mind and get to know. From my experience, because I've been in this business for 40 years, right? And first of all, when I have new students coming to my lab, I try to be a good advisor, which means that first I will get to know the students. Because in my work, we have different types of experiments which need different types of skills, like electrophysiology experiment with molecular biology, with the DNA, RNA expression, or experiments with animals that we have to do calcium balance or something. So, and the surgery. So I have to know the students first and see which type of skill that student has, because student doesn't know. So I might look at the personality and I would know which type of work will suit that person. So I think that is supposed to be good approach, so that student gets to do what they are good at. So I'll have to look for that. And from time to time, let's say along the line, the very first day that the student come into my lab, I know that by the third or the fourth month, if experiment still doesn't work, I know that students' morale is very down, and I have to get to them before that. So that means I have to keep up with the progress of my student all the time. I think good advisor should do that. Know the progress of your student all the time, so that you will know when to interfere. You don't leave it too late, so that the morale of the student is so down, it's so difficult to get it up again. So you make sure that, I use the word, I always feel the pulse quite often to see what my student is like at the moment. If she starts to feel discouraged, I would say, don't you worry. It's just like learning how to ride the bicycle. You just have to try, keep on trying, but you have to do it scientifically, okay? Know what could goes wrong. And then suddenly one day, you can ride the bicycle, and you don't know why. What did I do on that particular day, which was different from yesterday? You wouldn't know, but suddenly you can ride the bicycle. So I think you have to know your student, the stage of their morale all the time. I think that's important. And do whatever you can to get the student finished within the allotted time. I think that's important too. If you say bad advice, some people think of their work, because students' work is our work as well. And sometimes we keep the student too long. A student should have written the thesis, graduated, but you want the student to stay on so that you have more output from the lab. I think that's bad. So we should try to get students to finish in the shortest time as possible with a good training. And then, of course, after graduation, if student doesn't have to go anywhere and wants to stay on to do some work, you can hire them, and they can stay on to do extra work or something.
Last question. Or comments?
I have the last word. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ajahn, for a very informative, inspiring talk. We all at our different stages of working on our research, right? So I hope that you all benefited from this workshop. The Faculty of Graduate Studies, we actually organizing this workshop series to build or reinforce students' soft skills. And tomorrow it will continue by the SPSS Research Methodology Workshop whole day. So I hope you will also participate and benefit from that. And please don't forget to fill out the yellow evaluation form. And one more announcement for you on the donation about the community needs. So please welcome the PhD student to introduce about this initiative.
Before that, if anybody would like to ask questions or have comments, anything, you can email me. My email, natitip, my name, N-A-T-E-E-T-I-P. Okay, my name, natitip, N-A-T-E-E-T-I-P, dot, first three letters of the surname, K-R-I, at mahidol.ac.th. All of our ajahn would, our email would be our first name dot and first three letters of the surname. Okay, thank you.